York Giants' first litmus test is coming up this week against the Detroit Lions. Where does the team currently stand after 9 practices, and what should we look for in the joint practices? That's all coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Train. I'm a credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. Find my written work over at NewYorkGiantsOnSI.com. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, my everydayers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, Giants training camp review. Where is this team after 9 practices? We're going to talk about the joint practices coming up with the Detroit Lions, which start today, Monday. And we're going to basically do it with our fellow bucket hat wearer, Ed Valentine of Big Blue View. Edward, how are you?
I'm good, Patty. My bucket hat's put away already put away for the trip tomorrow, for the 90 plus degree heat that we're going to be in. You know, fun times, but I'm looking forward to those joint practices.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a good litmus test for the Giants. The Giants now have practiced, I think it's 9 practices now. And Ed, let's start there. After 9 practices, where would you say this team is at?
That's very interesting, Patty, because I think that, first of all, if you start with Daniel Jones, I think you have to feel good. Whether you're a Jones fan or not a Jones fan, he's going to be the starting quarterback, and he's taken every first team rep. And that's nothing but positive, even if some days have been good and some days haven't. It's still the first week of August, so that's good. But by and large, Patty, what I would say is the questions that we had about this team, at corner, at defensive line on either side of Dexter Lawrence, offensive line, even, if you want to go to who are the backup running backs, behind Devin Singletary, I don't think we've gotten answers to any of those questions yet. So, we're still figuring out how all of those things are going to shake out. The preseason and roster cuts from other teams will help shape that, but I don't think we've gotten solid answers to any of those questions to this point.
Of those questions that remain, which one really kind of concerns you at this point?
I'll give you 2, Patty. I'll give you one on each side of the ball. The corner question concerns me. As much as I like Cordale Flott, I think he's a decent player. Cordale Flott, to me, is really struggling at that outside corner spot during the first 9 practices. I think all Giants fans have seen the videos of him getting beaten by Malik Neighbors a couple times, maybe getting beaten by Wan'Dale Robinson. He got beaten really badly the other day for a touchdown in a red zone drill by Allen Robinson. And I think this is trending toward Nick McLeod winding up on the outside with Drew Phillips and Isaiah Simmons splitting the slot time. If, of course, the Giants aren't able to go out and find a starting cornerback somewhere else.
Yeah. Now, let me stick with the offensive line here for a moment, because obviously, in the spring, we anticipated it be one group John Michael Schmitz has now missed, what, 6 practices?
6. Mm-hmm.
Are we concerned about this yet?
I am. Let's put it this way, Patty. We're 9 practices in, and as of now, we have seen 2 reconfigurations of the offensive line that they thought they were going to have entering the season. One obviously because they moved Jermaine Illuminor to right tackle with Evan Neal being on PUP, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Evan Neal as we go along. But I said it right from the beginning. You've said it. I may have said it, on your show previously, but they were never going to move. The Giants were never going to move Jermaine Illuminor to right tackle unless that was a permanent move. So whatever happens with Evan Neal, Jermaine Illuminor is your week 1 starting right tackle for the New York Giants. I'm pretty darn comfortable putting down my marker and saying that, but now with John Michael Schmitz hurt, you've got Greg Van Roten signed, which was a good thing, I think, but the expectation was he'd be the right guard next to Illuminor, because those two played those 2 positions last year in Las Vegas. But we haven't been able to see the Giants do that yet because they don't have a backup center that they trust, and Greg Van Roten is having to fill that role. So I'm concerned about the fact that we're 9 practices in. We're probably going to go another week before we see, because John Michael Schmitz is not going to practice against the Detroit Lions. He's just not. He's not going to play in the preseason game against the Lions. So it's going to be next weekend at the earliest before you see John Michael Schmitz back at center and the Giants actually beginning to practice with what they hope will be their starting offensive line. And that's not good. Not good at all. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the last couple of depth spots, on that offensive line. So it could all work out because these are all capable, a lot of these guys are capable veteran players, but it's not a good start. And it makes you shake your head. It's like, can't they ever catch a break with this offensive line? So I'm definitely concerned about that, and I'm concerned about John Michael Schmitz. And my goodness, Patty missed 4 games last year with a shoulder injury. Brian Daboll says this is a different shoulder injury, but it's to the same shoulder, and that's a huge concern. And it's obviously not a little injury if he's missed 6 practices already. So yeah, I'm concerned at this point.
I mean, though, on the bright side, the fact that they went heavy with veterans for this offensive line, because the whole idea was to maybe get this line up and running quickly. Does that maybe calm you a little bit in thinking that, okay, once they settle on whoever the 5 is going to be, maybe, the fact that they have veterans, they can get them together and get them working cohesively quickly?
I think that helps, Patty, and I think that's a big part of what they did this offseason. I do think that helps. But I'm still concerned, if you can put Van Roten next to Jermaine Illuminor, then that's a good thing because they already have cohesion. They've already played a lot of snaps together. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about them, being able to communicate and work together because they've done that already, and they've done it, at a pretty good level. So, but you'd just like to see the rest of this offensive line settle. And, we talked about it last year where they went into week 1, just when they started practicing for the Cowboys is when they finally figured out their offensive line. And obviously we don't want to see that again because that was not a good thing.
And you mentioned Evan Neal and, Brian Daboll.
Do we have to, Patty?
Yeah, we do. I'm sorry.
Do we really have to talk about
Evan
Neal? I've had such a nice weekend, Patty, and now you're going to make me talk about Evan Neal.
Oh, I have to, Ed. I mean, you know why I'm here. I was put on this
Of
earth to,
course.
to torment you. But
Of
anyway,
course you were.
anyway, Dable was asked extensively about Neil and, of course, remaining tight-lipped. What's your sense with him? I mean, I know you and I have talked about it offline. I am of the opinion that this guy might have played his last snap for this team. I would be surprised if he comes back. I think he's going to start on pup. But where do you kind of see this headed?
Patty, I don't know that I'm willing to go to the has played his last snap for the Giants. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far, but Evan Neal's going to start this season on the pup list. I will be very surprised if he doesn't. I mean, at this point, he didn't practice all spring. How often do you and I both know what a guy who's close to coming back looks like when we watch practices and we look over there on the side or we look over on the far field and we see these guys running or working with trainers or doing agility drills. I've seen Evan Neal twice. I've seen him, pulling a band for a couple of minutes with a trainer, and I've seen him doing 4 or 5 little 10-yard sprints. That's the sum total of the work that I've seen him do so far this summer. Joe Shane said he's not far off, but I think by now, don't we know that the Giants don't tell us the truth when it comes to injuries? That's this regime, that's the regime before that, and the regime before that, and probably the regime before that. They don't tell us the truth about injuries, and why should they? So, Evan Neal's not close to coming back. So he's starting the season on pup, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, you would think by now, unless he's doing it inside while we're out on the field, he would at least be pushing. They have these like heavy things on wheels, and you would think he would be pushing against, a resistance at the very least. But absolutely, I agree with you that he doesn't seem anywhere near being ready to go. All right.
I have to ask you one more thing about Evan Neal, Patty, real
Do you
quickly.
have to?
Yes, I do. Just because I have to torture you a little bit now. Have you seen Evan Neal on the few occasions he's actually come out to watch practice? Have you actually seen him speak to a teammate yet? I don't
Not
think I have
really.
actually seen him speak to a teammate yet.
Not really.
So it's like there's something going on there, and it just the optics aren't good at all.
No, they're not. It's unfortunate, definitely. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more on Giants training camp and still to come. We're going to talk about the upcoming joint practices with the Detroit Lions. Giant fans, don't go anywhere. This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever find yourself comparing your life to those you see on social media? Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's so easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on their social media channel, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want to be instead of what others have so that you can start living your best life. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. All you need to do is fill out a questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find that your assigned therapist isn't a match, switch at any time for no additional charge. So go on and stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Hey, Giant fans, thank you for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. And now for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights into the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. My guest is Ed Valentine of Big Blue View. And we are talking about the first 9 practices of Giants training camp. We've got the Detroit Lions coming in. Depending on when you're watching this show, it'll either be today, Monday, or if you're watching on Sunday, it'll be tomorrow. So, Ed, before we get to the Lions, I want to talk about some of the good things that we have seen in Giants training camp. We spent kind of the first part of the show talking about, the concerns, but there have been some good things. I mean, I think we can talk obviously about Malik Neighbors. We can talk about Brian Burns. I think Dane Belton has looked good. The running game to me hasn't looked all that bad. I mean, what are some of the takeaways on the good side of the ledger that you have?
Well, like you said, Patty, Malik Neighbors, but it goes beyond Malik Neighbors with the wide receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson looks healthy. The big thing with Wan'Dale Robinson the first 2 years is the Giants haven't been able to get him in space enough and get him yards after catch and get him opportunities to do that. We've seen some of that in camp so far. Jalen Hyatt appears to have taken some strides. Hyatt maybe fooled us a little bit last year in training camp in terms of his readiness, but I love the kid. I love how hard he works. I love his attitude. And I think he's going to take a step forward. So for the wide receivers, it goes beyond Malik Neighbors. I think we've seen the Giants not always successfully, but I think we've seen them trying to push the ball down the field more. Couple of rookies on the offensive side that are impressive really are Tyrone Tracy, the 5th round pick, the running back. And I don't know about you, Patty, but I like what I've seen so far from Theo Johnson. I don't know how big a role he's going to be able to play initially, but I like what I see there as well.
Yeah, Theo Johnson, considering he got off to a little bit of a slow start, started on PUP, he's really come on. And I think it was Dan Duggan who put the stat out, and it was kind of interesting. He said that Daniel Bellinger's only caught 1 pass from Daniel Jones with the first team offense, which I found kind of interesting. I know Theo's caught quite a few. I don't know exactly how many, but I found that interesting. And,
I don't track those numbers the way that Dan does. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he does, how he manages to track some of the things that he tracks. But what I can say is it's been very clear that it's unclear how the Giants are going to use their tight ends and which ones are going to get playing time, because the assumption was that Bellinger was the clear number 1 after Darren Waller retired. And that is not what we are seeing by any stretch of the imagination. And the Giants can say, oh, well, we're ramping him up slowly and this and that, because he didn't practice much, if at all, in the spring. But I don't know, Patty, because Chris Manhertz is getting a lot of reps with the ones. Lawrence Cager's been getting a lot of reps with the ones. Theo Johnson got reps with the ones the second he stepped on the field after he came off the PUP list. So I don't know how that position's going to shake out, but if you've got a fantasy football draft coming up, folks, probably stay away from drafting Daniel Bellinger. That may not be a good idea.
Yeah. Now, Ed, one of the sleepers, if you will, a guy who I think, has really looked good. He's gotten quite a bit of first team reps. Deontay Johnson at linebacker. You look back to last year, Micah McFadden paired up with Bobby Okereke, but Micah McFadden, I know he had I think it was a hamstring injury to start in the spring. Also, missed tackles were a big thing with him. Also, a little bit off on coverage. I mean, that would be my pick right now for kind of like a surprise guy. Who do you look at as somebody who's really surprised you that you just didn't see coming?
Well, Deontay Johnson is one, Patty. There's no doubt about that. And for me, I'll just talk about Johnson for a minute. You have to remember that, Deontay Johnson, for example, was a practice squad guy a year ago. But this is a different defensive coordinator with a different defensive scheme. And, at a lot of positions, he's not looking for the same things that Wink Martindale was looking for. And that's one of the hard things sometimes about transitioning, from one defensive coordinator to another. So would it be a shocker if Micah McFadden doesn't play as much as we thought he might? It wouldn't be a shocker at all, really, because he might not be what Shane Bowen wants. For me, let's just talk about defensive line for a minute. I did a piece. This is timely for me because I did a piece on Sunday morning at Big Blue View about the defensive line. And there are two guys that I'm looking at. Ryder Anderson, of course, is a guy that Bowen talked about on Hard Knocks.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryder Anderson, undrafted free agent, guy who spent all of last year on the practice squad after suffering a triceps injury early in camp. Ryder Anderson is a starting defensive tackle in this group in base defense. Whether that turns out to be a good thing or not, we'll find out. But I'm not sure I saw that coming. And the other kid on the defensive line that you just have to root for is Elijah Chapman. This is a kid who I talked to Chapman the other day, 5'11", 280 pounds, knows darn well that, he said Andre Patterson might be the only defensive line coach in the entire league who doesn't care how tall I am. And this is a kid who he's been getting a handful of first team reps. And on Friday, he came through the line, with the Giants running a twist and had a sack of Daniel Jones. So we both know that sometimes we see these kids early in training camp, getting all these reps, and then it doesn't go anywhere. But for me, he's a kid to watch because he's a kid who only made the 90-man roster off a rookie mini camp tryout. And serious Nikita Whitlock vibes with this kid, undersized kid who nobody saw coming, and kid that you have to root for. So, for me, he's another surprise. And I always say that you don't root for teams per se, but you can root for people. And just knowing his story and having had a nice conversation with him the other day, he's a kid that I know I'll be rooting for.
Yeah. And also, you mentioned that defensive line spot. Boogie Basham is also in that mix. I had a conversation with him, very, very forthcoming, admitted that last year after he got traded, the trade kind of turned him on his ear, and he came in and he said, I never really felt comfortable. I didn't know what was expected. And he said, I just felt like I couldn't be me. And he's a lot more settled now. So he's, of course, competing with Ryder Anderson for a spot on that defensive line. Another guy to keep an eye on, who is looking to stick around.
I find Basham to be interesting because I just wonder, is he big enough to really play with his hand in the ground? Is he big enough to be a 3-tech? I don't know, but we might find out.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So speaking of that, the Lions are coming to town, or they're actually in town as we record this. They got in on Sunday. So we are going to talk about, right after this commercial break, we're going to talk about expectations, what we want to see, the litmus test. This is the first legitimate litmus test for the Giants this summer. We're going to discuss that right after this. Hey, Giant fans. Major League Baseball is in full swing, as are the Olympics. And pretty soon the WNBA will resume, as will the NFL, NBA, and NHL. There's just so much going on in the sports world these days that deciding what to bet on is harder than making the actual bet itself. And with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, placing your bets is so easy. You can choose from a wide variety of props, money lines, odds, futures, and more from any of the sporting events that are going on. And all this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all its customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head on over to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got me, Patricia Trainer, your host, special guest Ed Valentine of Big Blue View, the two bucket hat wearers, 2 of 3 bucket hat wearers, Daryl Slater of New Jersey Advanced Media, the third one. But yeah, Ed and I,
when we take the bucket hat photo, Patty, you are not allowed to be in it because Slater and I have the identical bucket hats.
Baloney, I'm the one who started wearing the bucket hat long before you came along.
Oh, it
I've been
doesn't
wearing
matter.
a bucket hat for years.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, Patty. You don't have the same one. You can't twin with us.
Doesn't matter. I've been wearing I've been on the beat longer than the two of you combined, and I've been wearing that bucket hat every year. So
Patty,
I get front and center for the group photo.
Sorry. Even if you're in the photo, Patty, you know, the technology now means we can take you out of the photo. So
yeah, all right, whatever. Ed, the Lions are coming into town.
Yes.
All right. Now, last year, when the Giants went to the joint practice with the Lions, it was pretty obvious, in retrospect, the Giants weren't anywhere near ready. They weren't standing toe-to-toe with the Lions. This year, Brian Dable kind of changed up how he was doing training camp. You see less 7-on-7s, more 11-on-11s. That may be to help Daniel Jones, who's coming off the ACL injury. But what are your expectations? Do you think, and I know you don't cover the Lions closely, but can this team maybe stand up a little bit better to the Lions than they have in the past? And what matchups are you particularly interested in seeing?
Well, Patty, it's interesting. I love the word that you used, litmus test, because we both know, it's still the first week in August. These teams are not what they're going to be in October or November. But the Lions won 12 games last year. They went to the playoffs. They're a team that people are attaching, the Super Bowl contender label to. The Giants are a 6-win team that people say will be lucky to hit the over on 6.5 expected wins for the year. So really, first and foremost, what you want to see is you want to see the Giants be competitive. You don't want to see free rushers in the backfield and the Giants completely unable to run an offense. You don't want to see the Lions doing whatever they want to do when they have the ball. So you'd like to feel like the Giants are somewhat competitive and not totally outclassed.
Yeah, one of the issues, like you said, I didn't go to the practices. I know you didn't go to the practices last year, but the reports out were that the Lions were just so much faster, so much more up-tempo, and the Giants were basically kind of huffing and puffing as they tried to keep up with them. But that said, the camp this year for the Giants is a little bit more intense. What are you going to be looking for besides the intensity and whether the Giants match up? Is there a specific matchup, a specific group you want to see perform? What's on your agenda?
Well, you want to see how the offensive line handles the pass rush for Detroit. Aiden Hutchinson, defensive tackle inside, Aleem McNeil. We know that a lot of the Giants' problems a year ago were on the inside of that offensive line. So you want to see how they hold up in there. Unfortunately, John Michael Schmitz won't be in there, but I don't want to see Aiden Hutchinson make Jermaine Illuminor look like a fence post, for 2 days. I want to see on the defensive side of the ball, I want to see how Deonte Banks matches up with somebody who's not named Malik Neighbors. It'll be interesting to see how the Giants wide receivers hold up, how Neighbors holds up. If the Giants can get some guys free, if they can get Jones protected, can they hit some plays like we've seen, against their own defense in the first few practices of training camp. So again, for me, it's just, people say all the time, they'll say, oh, the offense had a horrible day. Well, that might mean the defense had a good day. You want to see, when you're practicing against your own team, you don't want to see one side dominate all the time. And I think you want to come out of the 2 days just feeling like the Giants didn't get, totally outclassed for 2 days.
Yeah. And you look at the camp that Daniel Jones has had, kind of up and down. I mean, some of the passes that he completed were technically sacks. Some of them, you question the decisions, and then there were some good ones mixed in there. But what do you want to see from him specifically?
You know what? I'm curious. The Giants have not held him back at all. He has taken every first team rep. They have done quarterback run with him, including quarterback run up the middle. And granted, he's wearing red jersey. He's not going to get hit intentionally, but you're still running him into traffic. I mean, he's shown comfort, especially moving to his right when he gets out of the pocket. He's shown the willingness, no hesitation moving around. I'm curious to see how much they expose him to the Lions. And again, I'm curious about how comfortable he is. I think at some point we're going to have to stop talking about his knee, but this is the first time that he's seen a team that's not his own team. Might be the only time in the preseason. We don't know. So yeah. I think it will be interesting to see if the Giants sort of protect him at all, and keep him out of some situations.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling I'd be surprised if he plays Thursday night, the first preseason game on Thursday night. I mean, would you be shocked if he plays?
I'd be shocked if he plays. I'd be shocked pretty much if any of the starters play, Patty. They're going to get a ton of work Monday and Tuesday, and I'd be very surprised if any of the key players, play on Thursday night in the first preseason game. That's how a lot of these joint practice weeks go. The key guys get all their work in the practice sessions, and then they don't play in the game. So wouldn't be surprised at all. I wanted to mention, you mentioned briefly the way that the Giants have structured practices. If you remember, that started all the way back in the spring. A year ago, they did almost nothing in terms of competitive periods, not even 7-on-7s all spring, but they did 7-on-7. They did competitive work all spring, and they've done multiple 11-on-11 periods every practice this year, which is not how things were a year ago. And I don't know about you, Patty, but I like it. I like it because it's full teamwork, and it has to, in some way get guys sharper and get guys, closer to being ready, when the games start to count.
Yeah, absolutely. And Darius Slayton even said it. He said 7-on-7, you don't get a true feel for the pass rush, and the timing is a little different. So I like that they're doing more team drills as opposed to the 7-on-7 and the one-on-ones and all that stuff. I mean, this is what they should have been doing to get themselves ready. And I just think last year they were more concerned about getting to the starting line healthy. And this year they probably just said, look, if we get injured, we get injured. But let's get ready.
we've seen 2 or 3 things in terms of that. Jermaine Illuminor came off the field after the first practice, and looking like he had broken his ribs or whatever. And Daboll said, "Oh, he won't practice today," and he was out there taking 11 on 11 reps. At least in walkthroughs the first day, and he's been doing team drills ever since. Brian Burns was the same thing after he injured an ankle in a practice. The next day he was out there doing 11 on 11. Malik Neighbors, they tried to back him down a couple days ago, and he forced his way into some of the team drills. So all of that I take as a good sign. I take these guys are getting work, they're demanding more work, and I think all of that's good in terms of their preparation.
Well, then that raises another question, Ed. Do you think that maybe the medical staff is a little too overcautious with some of these guys?
Probably, probably, in the past, probably. I can't think of a specific example, but you remember last year there were a lot of guys all spring not practicing, and every guy gets a little ankle tweak. I would venture a guess that a year ago, Isaiah McKenzie the other day was down for quite a while, took a shot in the hip. I would bet you that there have been years where he wouldn't have practiced today, because he took that shot on Friday, but he was out there today doing 11 on 11 work. And they're not being stupid with these guys, but you've got to get them on the field. You've got to get them ready to play. And I'm glad to see it. I do think, you can probably make the case that they've been overly concerned at times about protecting guys, and in the end haven't gotten guys ready.
Yeah. And look, what's a hallmark that they preach? They preach about toughness. And if you're going to hold guys back, I mean, look, nobody's going to be 100% after 9 practices, and especially some of these in just absolute horrible, hot, humid weather. Mm-hmm. So, if you have something and you're not going to make it worse by practicing, you got to suck it up.
You got to get out there. You got to get ready.
Absolutely. All right, Ed, final question for you. By the time Lions week is over, and I'm talking not just the joint practices, but the game coming up, what do you want to see to say, I feel good about the direction this Giants team is headed?
Well, like I said, I think you want to see, you don't want to feel like they got blown off the field during the 2 practices. You want to feel like even if it's clear that the Lions are in a better place right now and will probably go farther this year, you want to feel like there are some things the Giants can hang their hats on, like, oh, we have an advantage if we can get the ball to some of these wide receivers. It doesn't matter how good the other team is. And you come out of the first preseason game, there's questions all over the roster about depth, and you'd like to come out of Thursday, feeling better about some of the depth pieces. You'd like to see good performances out of some of the defensive backs. You'd like to see, somebody step forward in that running back competition. So I think you just want to feel better about the roster as a whole, and you want to feel like they're making progress.
Yeah. I mean, it's preseason. The games don't count. Obviously, you don't want to get too worked up over the results and what you see, because that's not really what they're looking for. But at the same time, you don't want to see them, look like they don't belong on the same field with their opponents this preseason. I think that's the best way to put it.
Right. That's what happened last year in week 1 against Dallas. And obviously we're not at week 1 yet, but you don't want to come out of the week thinking, boy, oh boy, the Giants just have no chance to be competitive against good football teams.
Yeah. That would just be, that would set us up for another long year. And I think it looks like they learned their lesson from last year, but will it translate? Well, we're going to find out, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
All right, Ed, appreciate it as always. That's going to do it for us today, Giant fans. As always, thank you for tuning in and spending some time with us. Don't forget, if you are watching on YouTube, to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I've got to get to 10,000. The Cowboys and the Eagles are at 10,000. I'm not there yet. Come on, guys, help a gal out, will you? So just subscribe to the channel, click the little bell for notification every time I post a new video. Like the video, it all helps. And don't forget to check out Ed's work on Big Blue View. He's pounding away. Yeah. He's got his shirt on. For those of you who aren't who are listening to the audio, he's got his Big Blue View shirt on. So check out his work, check out my work, and Giant fans, we will see you tomorrow. I'll have all new show for you following practice 1 against the Detroit Lions. For Ed Valentine, I'm Patricia Traina. We'll see you soon.